Welcome to Bag Boy. My name is Emily Denton. I'd like to start by thanking you for being here. I also want to preface by explaining that some of the aspects of my talk will be non-consecutive. What I mean is that my work branches off into many different directions and often at the same time. I will do my best to explain my process in an order that makes sense, but it may not be in the order that I experienced it. You may or may not know that I am a photography grad student. However, you may have noticed that there is no photography in here. So today I'd like to go into detail about how I entered graduate school as a photographer, but am leaving considering myself as much more than that. The next few images I will show you were made in my first year of school. From the very beginning, I tried to push my understanding of photography. I was encouraged to explore the outer realms of the photographic image. The first series was made using a projector. I projected images of my family and then interjected myself and my twin sister into the image. This may appear to be straightforward, but my intention was much more complex than what you see in this image. My sister Megan and I grew up in a highly dysfunctional home. Both of our parents struggled with drug and alcohol addiction. This was just our reality, and as we got older, I began to process my childhood in ways that were not possible at a young age. When I entered grad school, I decided very quickly that I wanted to do things that had not been seen before. It didn't take me long to realize that my own experiences were so familiar to me, but not familiar to others. I present my past objectively because it's just my reality. It is factual in essence. Ultimately, I just wanted to tell a story. I wanted to tell my story, but I didn't quite know how to do that. So I assumed I needed to use text to tell a story. My next project was making this scroll that was 18 feet long in length. I imagined a scroll being unrolled and read as it's being unrolled. The scroll was digitally sewn together with images made from projecting family photographs and then writing a story that I placed within the images. What I'm going to show you next is when I entered my second year of grad school. This is from an installation class that I took with Charles. He selected the Ross camp as our location. This particular camp was used primarily in the 1960s, and its buildings were mostly left true to the time, often feeling and looking somewhat decrepit. This is the entrance to the space that I chose, so this was the front door leading into my space. This is an image of walking down into the basement of the space that I chose. And when Charles was asking us to choose a space, he asked us to respond emotionally to the space we chose. So I pretty quickly found myself remembering what it was like growing up in the basement of my house. It was very dark, it was very cold, it was really just very lonely, and I felt really isolated. So as soon as I saw this stairwell leading down into the basement, I knew that this needed to be my space. Here's an image of the first night we toured this space. This is the bathroom. I wanted to pick this for many reasons, but the first reason was because it really scared me, and I think that it was something I needed to face myself. It also really intrigued me because there was an energy in the room that I did not feel in any other parts of the Ross camp. There were mirrors set up like this, and I knew that I wanted to work with the mirrors. And so this was the before, and then this was the after. I knew that I wanted to light the bathroom in a really particular way with the blue light. And then I was thinking about toilets and what the toilets represent, what goes in a toilet, what do you do with the handle, you flush the toilet. So I put little LEDs inside the toilet, and then I left notes inside of the toilet. And really, after I realized that I wanted to use the lights, I knew that the different colored lights needed to represent something in particular. So the title of this exhibit is Green is Blue plus Yellow. So I had 3 different colors of lighting that I chose, and each of those colors represented something different. So the blue represents kind of the loop that I get stuck in the space that I can't escape. And this is where primarily the videos are projected into the blue space, and I have a video I'll show you in a minute. So this is kind of like I'm stuck in the past, stuck in the past, stuck in the past. And then if I go to the green light, I put the green light in the area where the showers are. And so I was trying to think of, well, there are showers here, so what does water represent is kind of a cleansing, and it's a cleaning off of whatever you need to clean off. So I transitioned from being stuck to a green light where I could clean myself. Here's another image, and I also have a projector set up in the main shower area. And then the third light I had was a yellow light, but I only chose 1 light bulb, and I hid it behind this door that was locked, so you couldn't get to the light. So for me, this was something that I hadn't quite figured out yet. How do I go from blue to green to get to yellow? So the yellow light to me was the most symbolic light, but it was very little space that it took up in the room. And here's a video, and there is sound, and I want to explain the sound. So I had several projectors set up with similar to this video of found family footage, which is not my family, but I consider it to be universal in a way, because we all look at it and we all feel, I think, feel the same nostalgia, hope, maybe loneliness or sadness or happiness. So that was my intention of using the family video. But the sound, I left the showers running, so you're hearing the sound of water running, you're hearing the water go down into the drain, and then some of the pipes squealed and squeaked. So I audio recorded the pipes squeaking, and I put that on a loop and like hit a speaker, so that I think it was every 2.5 minutes you hear this pipe squealing that's like a foghorn, or it sounds like a tugboat, which is like the SOS call. And so it was actually really loud in there, and so I think it was quite startling for people. But then you got used to hearing that there's rescue and on the way is how I saw it. So I do have sound, but it's only on this computer, so I've turned it up all the way. So I'm just going to show the first bit. So after taking this installation class, I realized that I have a lot to say, and I need a space to do that, and printing a flat picture and putting it on the wall is not going to be sufficient enough for what I need to say and express. So the following semester, I took a materials class with Siggy, and this was my first time really doing anything other than photo and the installation. And I was still very attached to using words because I didn't know yet quite how to say what I wanted to without words still after installation. So I began stitching and hand stitching, and I think this comes from a place of anger at my mother specifically, and I had a lot to say, but I couldn't say it to her. So this was a way for me to kind of purge myself of that without her having to see it. So I took these stitchings and I turned them into bags, and I started with water, and then I suddenly thought, well, this is just like an IV bag. And there's something about, for health reasons and then for like sickness reasons, but I am the one who's stitching the healing aspect for her. So I started with the words, and then the words became distorted. And this is when I started to realize that I didn't necessarily need to use words to say what I needed to say. This was the last one that I made. And then we come to surplus and salvage, which is where most of my material comes from. This is a very important place to me, RIP surplus, but before I entered grad school, I had gone to surplus many times. However, it never occurred to me that I can go there to find things that I needed for art. Only when Siggy said, well, how are you going to hang your bags? What are you going to do with your bags? They can't just sit on the table. She said, you need to go build a stand or find a stand for your bags. So she said, go to Home Depot. And that was really, did not intrigue me at all to go to Home Depot to buy pipes or wood. So I went somewhere that I would just walk in and feel things when you walk in. If you haven't been, I will try to describe it. So there's a particular part of surplus and salvage, which is the basement, which is, a repetition of the basement in the installation space. But this one was just much bigger. There's a very large ramp, probably the size of half of this room, that leads down into the basement. It's concrete, and you can feel the temperature difference as you're walking down. You smell it. It smells like mildew, like mothballs, and just old things like old books. And the first time I went down there, I don't have a lot of pictures because I kind of just held my breath and went, or I wasn't going to go. So this is kind of half of the ramp leading down. It's the only picture I had. So I go down in the basement, and this is the section that I cannot get away from. The crutches that are hanging, why are they hanging on the ceiling like that next to air hockey tables? And then to the right we have like walkers, and then that's where I started to find all of the medical equipment that is here. So I come across these two carts, which are called bag boys, and they were unlike any of the other objects I saw in that store. So I saw them and I immediately felt like a rush in my stomach, I guess. And the first thing I bought them, and I paid $6 each for them. But the first thing I did was flip it upside down and turn it into a figurative object. So the tops that are holding the jars and the glasses are actually supposed to be the bottom that holds the golf bag, right? And then the stand is actually the handle, so I just took everything and twisted it around. And this is when I realized that I can just do this and twist them upside down, and then I'm saying a lot without needing to use the words. So it was actually only 1 year ago, this last spring, that I bought these, so all of this has come pretty much from a year of work. So when I was trying to put them together, I had the one further from me, and that's the one that I made first, and I started to hang my mother's IV bags on it. So that one immediately became my mother's cart. And I liked the idea of having to kind of wheel it around and carry her weight. And then Secondly, I was asked to address the other cart, which in my mind was just going to be my father's cart. And this one I think was harder for me to make because I'm not as close to my dad. So I'm very disconnected from him. So I would go to surplus and salvage and I would find the objects that you see on the cart and I put them together basically. And when I was working on assembling the carts, I had to learn a lot about myself and about how things work. So how does a water pump work? If I connect IV tubes in here and here, will it drip the way that I want it to drip? How does epoxy work? Because I've never used epoxy. So, well, it turns out that it would stick to glass. So then I just had to work it myself and figure it out myself. And a lot of this is about me learning to do this on my own without needing help. So, and even when I installed it over the weekend, the tube was dripping much faster at a steady stream than it was supposed to, so the cup was filling up very fast. So I had to figure out Monday morning at 7 in the morning, how do I get the water to drip slower. So I took a ballpoint or a dressing pin with the big head on it and I stuck it down in the thing. And so if you look closely, there's a yellow dot from where I tried to put like a fake ball bearing in there so that it would drip slower, and it worked. So the wall items that you see come from me walking into this place that resembles my home, surplus and salvage, and I'm going in there with this feeling of I'm trying to channel my father, and I'm grabbing objects whether through their materials, so this is enamel, or the color, or what something does. So a flashlight, it flashes, it's a warning sign, stay away. Either stay away or come find me and come help me. And these are both from these flashlights are both from the 60s. So, or I can take something and I can bend it a certain way to say something other than what it's meant to be used for. And then I was asked to do the same thing for my mother's objects, which are on this wall, which if you can't tell, they're much larger in scale than these objects. And it was actually a really interesting moment for me because I realized she takes up so much more space in my brain than my father does, and I cannot. These were as small as I could find. I walked in and found a big clock that hung on the wall, like this big, and I was like, that's one, but I can't, I can't buy all the big things and put them in here. But in an attempt to reconcile my past, I went to surplus and salvage to find the objects, and this really comes from when I was 18 years old, so I was old enough to remember, but that was 12 years ago. So I lost my home due to foreclosure, and so I lost all of my objects and all of my belongings. But I was 18, so I was in college, so it wasn't like I got kicked out. I just went back home and my stuff was gone. And I didn't have a chance to get the really important things to me. So my favorite shoes in the closet, or I had love letters in my bedside table. None of that I had the opportunity to get. So when I walk into surplus and salvage, it's like suddenly it's my chance to grab the things that I didn't get to grab. And I was trying to do it in an objective way. So what would my mother grab? What would my father grab? So I'm going to switch directions and I'll talk about the etching in the video that you see on the wall. Last summer, so it hasn't been a year ago, I had the opportunity to go to Penland in North Carolina to do a workshop. And I didn't get my first choice workshop, which was neon, like neon light, where you bend the tubes, make whatever shape or words that you want to make, and then flood the tubes with whichever gas to create whichever color light you want, which seemed absolutely perfect for me because I could then use light as the medium that I wanted to use. But I ended up getting into my second choice workshop, which was anodizing aluminum, which I felt nothing about, but I was like, well, I don't have to pay for it, so I'll just do it. So this is what we did on the first day, which was etching aluminum plates with copper sulfate. These were 2x2 sample squares that we did. The next step, which was what the whole workshop was about, was anodizing and then dyeing colors. And as soon as I did that, I said, I don't want to do this. This is not, it's pretty and cool, but I'm like needing to do something that's relevant to me and to my work. So on the third day, I told my instructor, who was really wonderful, yeah, I don't want to do that. Instead, I want to take this photograph and I want to etch this photograph with a Vendee dot pattern. And so he said, okay, we can do that. So I used a free program and we figured out how to divide this photograph into panels that I could then print with a vinyl, or cut with a vinyl cutter, and then go in and weed out the dots, let's say. And then I would etch the plates. And this is where the top row has been etched. And then this is the final that I made, which ended up, well, this is 4 times bigger than this. So I did a prototype, and I was glad I did the prototype, but there were many challenges to making the big one here. So the first thing I did was, well, I need a vinyl cutter. I don't have a vinyl cutter that I have access to. So I applied for the Promise Award, and I got the Promise Award, so then I bought the vinyl cutter. And it took me quite a while to figure out how to use the vinyl cutter, and after I did that, I was just on a roll. So each panel is almost 23 inches square. So if you've ever weeded vinyl before, you know that it's not very fun. So I spent a lot of time. This is the scale, this is the face, if you can make that out. I spent a lot of time weeding, and the panel number 8 took 5 hours to weed because it's almost just completely negative space. And I think at this point it's really important for me to explain the purpose of the Vendee dots, because this for me is the magic touch. It's my secret, which you may or may not have taken art history, but I'm going to put this in my own words, and I'm not an art historian, but to me, well, Vendee dots come from pop art, which is post-World War II, okay? So if you think about it, Vendee dots, the artists using Vendee dots were putting those dots on images of pop culture, so Marilyn Monroe, Andy Warhol, if you guys have seen that. So they did this in a way that was kind of agreeing with or accepting American culture during post-World War II times. But they did this in a way to separate, I think of it as a separator between surface level and underneath surface level. So they wanted you to look at the surface. They wanted you to notice the surface of the image by look at these flashy dots and look what's happening with the dots, and isn't it cool looking? But they're actually saying to you, there's so much more here than what you're seeing on the surface. And so for me, this was my tool to where I can say exactly what I want to say about my mom without having to use words, without anybody else knowing it but me. So this is to scale. And my next step is transfer tape, which is also a pain. So these are images of transferring the face onto the aluminum. Here's the image of the face on the aluminum. Now I have all of the vinyl on the aluminum, and then my next step is to etch, which is copper sulfate and just table salt, so it's a 1-to-1 ratio. And this is very toxic, okay, so don't just go out and do this. And there were a lot of preparations that needed to be made, so I had to do this outside because of the fumes, and I needed a vent and a full respirator and splash goggles and gloves. So this is an image of the solution being mixed. And there were so many obstacles that I had no idea would even be an issue. Like, I can't find a tray that's big enough for this piece of metal, so having to deal with that. And then the waste disposal, I think I filled up 8 or 9 3 or 5 gallon buckets. So this is an image of after I etch, I have to remove basically the chemicals from the plate. And so there's something about this that to me was almost violent. And I think I just had to remove myself emotionally from it. Because when you put the plate in the acid, there's bubbling and burning and boiling, and you can hear it sizzling, and you see it deteriorating in front of your eyes. And I just had to kind of step back and watch it happen. So I next removed the vinyl, and I made some tools, like a wooden dowel that I sanded at an angle so that I could kind of scrape off the vinyl. And then here are images of removing the vinyl from the face. And then I cleaned the plates in a sodium hydroxide solution, which was equally as bad as the copper sulfate in terms of toxicity. And there's another kind of healing aspect of putting my mom's face in this bath that's supposed to clean her, this very strange feeling. And then there was a big to-do about, okay, I have all the plates etched now, how do I actually put them up on the wall? So with Charles's help, we built a French cleat system, which I then just used a JB Weld epoxy to I hoped that it would stick to the plates, and it did. And this is a setup of how I just hope that I measured correctly, and then I just have to put the bricks on, and then they would wiggle if you've used epoxy. So after you put weight on it, it shifts around, so then I have to go and put a brick behind it and then in front of it to make sure that it's going to be straight. So then we hung it, and I applied at this point a stove polish, which darkens we'll say the negative space, so the black space. And then the next step is to remove the stove polish, which is very messy, I'll just say, very messy. So there are a lot of steps of applying something, removing it, applying it, removing it, applying, removing it. And this was the last step before I hung and projected. And I'm projecting the same video, not the same exact clips of installation, but the same kind of video, because it's just reinforcing the loop that I cannot get out of. It's another image. And I have the chairs here, which I gathered from surplus and salvage as well, of course. And I don't know if anybody went to their sale on their last weekend being open, but that was a really traumatic moment for me, because I walked into this space that was really safe, and there were strangers in there, and they were going through my things. And I was going to go in, I was going to look around and take my time like I usually do, but I immediately grabbed the chairs I needed and left, because I couldn't even, there was a very strange invasion of privacy and of space. So I grabbed these chairs, and that's also kind of symbolic to me because that was my last trip in there, and that was the last step of having a space to view the video. So I actually have, the chairs are for each member of my family, and I've put them in order. And I didn't quite think about it, but it's my dad and my mom and then me and then my sister, and it was a way of, I started thinking, why is my sister's on the end? Why did I just put her chair there? And I think I am the barrier between her and my parents, and I'm trying to protect her from them, so I put myself in the middle to kind of section them off. So I don't have the sound playing at the moment for this presentation, but there is sound, and if you haven't heard it, I'll turn it on after this, and you can come in. But it's sounds of whispers, and it's very uncomfortable if you haven't heard it. And the whispers come from, this is a face swap of, this is a face swap of me and my twin, and she has her MFA in poetry, and she wrote a series of poems, and that is the audio that you hear. I just have a couple more because every time I say I'm a twin, the first question is, are you identical? Do you look alike? Let me see a picture. So I have some. And this was us on our 30th birthday. And the poems that you're hearing come from, I have to give credit because they've been published, so legally this is the journal where they come from, Salt Hill Journal, issue 42. The poems come from this series called A Crown, and this is not my expertise, so I'm going to describe it the best way I can, but A Crown is a series of poems that has no end and no beginning. So the first line is the last line of the previous one, and then the last line is the first line of the next one. So my sister wrote the poems for me, I guess, as like a dedication, but it's not just about me, it's about us together and the role I've played in her life growing up. So this is the first one, my sister the twin, and the first line is, milk of my milk, yolk of my yolk, who are you? And this is where I got egg things from, if you haven't noticed. And this is where I got the milk-looking liquid from. So for me, this is the beginning, which is here. That's like the creation, but it's also the end. So it is that shape. It's the egg shape. And here's an action shot of me trying to take pictures of egg yolks. I have a flashlight underneath the bowl, and then I'm holding two, and then I have it on a self-timer with a macro lens, and then this is what I got. And I'm just going to show my poster because there is a mirroring image, which is twin-esque, I guess I'll say. But this is the point where I want to explain the title. I want to talk about Bag Boy a little bit because, yes, it is the carts. The carts are called Bag Boys, but when I was thinking about titles, nothing seemed more appropriate than that title for me, because when I think about a bag boy, I also think about someone being in service of others, working for someone else, making sure that that person has everything they need. I think about medical IVs and someone having some kind of medical bag, which is reminiscent of health in general, but in particular for me and my parents' health, whether it's physical or mental. I think about, there's this Erykah Badu song called Bag Lady, and it kind of tells a story about a woman who has so many bags of stuff that she's burdened and weighted down by the bags, and every time she tries to move, her body hurts because of all of her stuff. And that's my mom. But then it's something a little bit deeper. It's like, is that me too? Because I'm doing this in a way of saying that I have some kind of baggage as well. So yeah, this title really, really stuck with me, and Next, I have my artist statement, which is over here in the typewriter. I know it's kind of hard to read, but in a way it doesn't really matter what it says, because this is about blank, this is about blank. And there's a form where you can participate, because my hope is that if I've done my job correctly, you walk in here and I don't have to tell you what it's about. If I have to explain it to you, then I feel like I've failed. So for me, this is what it's about, but for you it can be about whatever you feel when you walk into the space. And I was gathering my writing utensils, and I was thinking, oh, I guess I need to put some pens out. So how do I go to the Walmart and buy a pack of pens? No, I can't go to surplus anymore, so I just go to my house and I gather all of the loose writing utensils, which seemed appropriate. And then I even have some in the jar that don't work. So then there's an element of you're trying to write, but the pen doesn't work. And then you're having this experience about, oh, I grab another pen, well, should I write something else? Should I not have written what I was going to write? And I have a white pencil, so, and then things like that. And at this point, I would like to give my thank yous. So my first thank you goes to Siggy. That's enough. I want to thank you for believing me and believing in me. Charles, you are so kind and so gracious with your space and your time. Jennifer and Jen, thank you for letting me attack you in all ways and ride up the elevator with you. David, who's not here, for helping me build the pedestals. Shane, for fixing the projector at 5 o'clock on Sunday because I couldn't get it to work. Charmaine, who's I don't think here. Molly for vinyl. Elaine, who's not here either, but for Photoshop. Craig Summers, who isn't here, for welding, helping me weld the foot. John, the building deputy, for randomly entering and telling me, you're using the wrong drill bit, or that's going to fall down. My last thank you goes to Amy. My partner, who I've never felt such an unconditional love in. Whether it was helping me etch or helping me experiment with eggs, or midnight Beyonce dance parties, all while trying to earn her PhD in chemistry in a couple months. Everybody in this room, I couldn't have done it without support from everybody. And at this time, I will answer questions if you have any.
Why are there no Tags
But,
rather
you know,
than
tags,
descriptions.
descriptions on.
Oh, because I see this as all as one. And I don't think it can be separated at this point with this title, so it's all one.
Were you able to express to surplus knowledge to people there, like how critical of a space that was to you, or like?
Yeah, Kelsey's not in here, is she? Oh. Yeah, I tried to. They always questioned me and what I was buying. There was, I don't know her name, but a lady who wanted my postcard and poster and was going to promote the show there, but, you know, didn't quite make it.
Do you ever see yourself going back to the traditional photography?
It's a part of my heart and soul, and it's my root. I'm always taking pictures. I just think I can incorporate it differently now. I would love to start taking pictures again with color film, but you know, the facilities are not available. But it will always be my starting point in my home, and it's what I know best.